ladies and gentlemen, and all incorporated transhuman algorithmic entities as defined by the European Union Court of Human Rights, live from the near future, in association with King Waspinator Studios, and filmed before a live studio audience in beautiful downtown Icon City, Total Party Skills presents yet another episode of America's Next Top Antichrist, with your host, King Krampus. And now here he is, the moment you've all been waiting for, King Krampus.
Do you remember how, in The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Fanghorn was very stubborn about maintaining Intish neutrality because of the indifference the various outside powers to the forest were to the plight of the forest itself? Until he saw that a chunk of the forest had been destroyed, and then all of a sudden he is like, well, come on boys, it's time to roll up on Orthanc. I have to say, the White House being bulldozed to build a ballroom seems to be my final straw.
Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator and the editing studio. Do we trust even that the company that's doing this remodeling to make the ballroom on the White House to be able to match the exterior after they've torn it all down and turned it into rubble that's just going to be, carted away and thrown out in a dump? Like, is that, you're cool with that? A third of the White House being just thrown in a city dump. They're going to match the exterior so a chunk of the building doesn't look weird, right? You know, it'd be one thing if the ballroom was being made to be, well, because they're, doing interior remodeling, but not tearing down the outside shell of the fucking building. Like, so glad I don't have to listen to you people anymore. Feel free to unsubscribe.
I've spent the last, 3 or 4 years running this channel trying to be diplomatic and understanding and taking right-wing people at their word and not distrusting them, thinking, because, you got to be able to give people a chance to redeem themselves and reform and all that kind of stuff, The fact that out of nowhere one year I happened to notice that you see left-wing people saying that Martin Luther King wasn't good enough because he had been promoting colorblindness, and then suddenly you started seeing people on Fox News quoting Martin Luther King all the time. I thought maybe there had been some sort of social flip in this, even if they were doing it cynically at first, that, after many years of, parroting these things, it would actually kind of start to imprint on them subconsciously. And maybe it has with some. But, man, between the White House and some of the recent text leaks, Jesus Christ, guys, it's great. I feel like I can basically, never have to listen to any of y'all and your dumbass talking points ever again. You've been defrocked and revealed to be utter hoaxes, and maybe that wasn't your intention, but, unless you start renouncing shit soon, that's how you're going to be judged. Unfortunately, the people who are still clinging to the labeling of the left are themselves kind of stuck with some bad options. I feel that by now everyone should be pretty clear that the Democrat Party is just a business that sells access to politicians, and they took advantage of the woke movement to be able to zazz up kids and try to get them to vote for their old ass archaic asses. But every time they get to the general elections, suddenly they're more interested in getting suburban Republicans and start quietly ignoring some of the various policies that early on they were supportive of to get the support of the youth. And you can only pull that off so many times and be shown that it's all bullshit a few too many times. Everyone's gotten kind of cynical of politics in the post-COVID era. Go fucking figure. For reasons that I'm not going to try to attribute a theory to, the Green Party is not interested in winning. And so that kind of leaves the left stuck with the Democrats as being the only party that's got any infrastructure that can put left-aligned people in political office. But can they be trusted? They just want to be Republican light. Look how fast they've been willing to drop some of what had been their long-term core constituents. Now that they suddenly feel like this is, politically awkward. Oh no, young white men aren't going to vote for us. No. Suddenly that's now important to them. You know, either they're lying now, or they've been lying in the past, and either way, once they've been revealed to be lying, why would you trust anything else they have to say? But they do have infrastructure in all 50 states for political offices. And I can't help but notice that like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries aren't the ones running the Democrat Party right now. It's Bernie Sanders. He might not have any official power over them, but I can't help but notice that all the Democrat candidates here who have any kind of energy and zing behind them right now, they all seem to like go to Bernie to be anointed, and and he's been doing the rounds on a bunch of what had been considered right-wing podcasts, and like he's the actual moral center of the Democrats at the moment, which is ironic because he's technically not a Democrat. He just caucuses with them. And there's the stuff going on in New York City right now with Zoran Mamdani. And, good God. Of course, right now is the time to be vacuuming in the middle of the afternoon. Well, shit, I've lost my train of thought. I guess, long story short, the only political ideology on the left that hasn't actually really been tried and given its day in court is communism. Now, the problem with the actual American Communist Party as it is right now is that it's still based in a century-old revolutionary model of communism. The people who would label themselves and be members of that are largely just performative, youth rebel type personalities, who may have read some Marx and stuff, but like they all use the exact same talking points and terminology, and they're still stuck in this thinking that like you're gonna have to use means of violence to seize the whatever. Most of what I know about communism comes from a pamphlet I have that outlines instructions for psychopoliticians to manipulate America by basically making a large critical mass of Americans think they're insane. And then, of course, there's all this theorizing about like the long march through the institutions and all that. The thing is all that, to a degree, is true, and we're a century later. We're to the point where America should have been crumbling and the Soviet Union and Russia come swooping in to take over. That was how communism was supposed to be manifested in this country. And at their origins, at the beginning of the 20th century, the American Communist Party was set up and encouraged to be that way. And so they weren't really designed to themselves make us a communist country. They were supposed to soften us up by making us question ourselves. For external communism, that doesn't exist anymore because, as try as they might, there are some significant flaws to how communism has been attempted. And the social imprint of the society can't be changed overnight, which is why Russia still basically seems to be ruled by czars under other names, and China is still an empire, but they dress their emperor and all his noblemen in communist clothes. And Korea, North Korea that is basically a kingdom that dresses in communist clothes. Which is why I would propose looking at the Vietnamese model. Now, after they finally got America to leave, their only real ally was the USSR, which is kind of interesting how the various communist countries don't all automatically get along, and that China and Vietnam still dislike each other because of their own historical baggage between each other.
Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator, still in the editing bay. I would like to add to all this that, as a caveat or contextualization, My grandfather was there at the fall of Saigon. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who was a liaison officer to the CIA. So basically he was running an office and had an office job himself. Up to that point, like, the most combat he had seen was someone had shelled the golf course he was golfing on one day. But on that day, one of his last things he was supposed to do is go out into town and collect one of the various families of, the Vietnamese who had been collaborating with the American Army. And he got a little bit away from where he had been stationed, apparently stopped, cried in his car for like a minute, turned around and went back to the embassy. And if you've ever seen those famous photos of the helicopters taking the last people off from the top of the embassy there at Saigon, well, he's in one of those helicopters. So anyway, I'm not just like talking about Vietnam entirely out of nowhere. Let's continue.
Vietnam does not want to cede their sovereignty to China in the same way that neither the Chinese nor the Russians wanted to cede sovereignty to each other. Yet, despite the fact that the idea of global communism would mean that at some point the various different communist countries would have to drop their borders, and so it's just weird that they're like right next to each other, dude. How come they weren't the same government? But that's besides the point. They tried doing all the extensive price controlling and market manipulation stuff that ultimately Russia had to like throw its hands up about. Like, we can't, it's too much, it's too variable, it's not working. And they went through a brief period of that and had to rely a lot on the USSR until the USSR collapsed post-perestroika. And they were basically pressured into having to accept a bunch of loans from the World Bank. Kind of shit. Like, come hell or high water, goddammit, we are going to use the Vietnamese for cheap labor. Whether the French do it, or Americans do it, or the South Vietnamese do it, or the Vietnamese just fucking voluntarily do it because we bomb the fucking shit out of most of their infrastructure and don't just rebuild that out of nothing. But after that, though, they didn't like abandon being communist. Hell, China's probably abandoned communism in more ways than the Vietnamese seem to have. They just seem to actually have a longer term view of it, realizing that you can't just get there overnight. And also, they haven't been trying to do cultural revolution shit, trying to make the Vietnamese population, drop their holidays and festivals and become atheist and all that kind of shit. Like, they're proceeding about it at a reasonable pace, and they're not trying to be like throw all the money out of the, like they accept the fact that they live on this planet, and these are the conditions that have been forced on them, and they can at least be smug knowing that they're one of the only places on Earth that successfully kicked America out of it. Because technically that's not what happened in Afghanistan. So it's still Vietnam. And perhaps, as Americans, it wouldn't hurt us to actually, like, listen a little bit to what our old enemy had to say. See, like, what kind of wisdom they might have had to offer. Maybe understand why it is that we lost. Part of it is patience. The Vietnamese were very patient, because it's not like the Vietnam War began with us invading them. That they'd been at war for quite some time and still had some wars, because there's some lingering shit with Pol Pot and all that kind of stuff right after America's involvement in Vietnam ended. But American communism needs to be divorced from the revolution. It's not necessary anymore. That was 100 fucking years ago. The populace is as woke as possible. It's as critical level of self-doubt. It doesn't need that. And in fact, it just makes it harder, because threatening people or making people think they are being threatened is not the way to convince them to, see the light or anything like that. And we've had a century of watching, like, all the major communist countries that underwent the revolutionary process fucking fall on their fucking face. Technically, I would not classify Vietnam as one of them either, because they didn't really have to revolt against themselves. Theirs was a war of liberation, at least from their point of view. And a chunk of us now, if you think about it. They called Obama a socialist a million times in the 2008 election and the 2012 election, for that matter. And he got elected anyway. And afterwards, he started to see an upsurge in people willing to be socialists, to a point that one of the first people to declare their candidacy for president in 2016 was Bernie Sanders, a Democratic socialist. And he was popular, by having gotten elected after being lied about. It caused a lot of people to realize that, maybe socialism is more viable than we think. And then Trump comes around, and a lot of people called him fascist and Nazi and yada yada yada. And then he gets elected, and that means there's a chunk of people out there on that side who would read that the same way, who might be closeted about some of their political tendencies, but feel more comfortable being open about it, as we have been seeing lately, according to the news. So, what do you think's going to happen when Zoran Mamdani gets elected mayor of New York City after being called a communist a million times on the television? Absolutely, just trounces Andrew Cuomo, because no one trusts that guy. He oozes sleaziness, That ain't going to happen. Fucking Sliwa probably has a better chance of winning than Andrew Cuomo. But Zoran gets elected after they've called him a communist to his face dozens upon dozens upon dozens of times on the evening news. And then what? And as I said, Bernie Sanders himself is already being treated as the moral center of what remains of the Democrat Party, and the one with the most influence, the one that people seek the anointment of. They aren't going to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to be knighted, to join Camelot. That's Sanders. That says a lot about where the actual mood of the actual party is. And so, after having spent a decade and a half courting the woke youth and wokeness cynically, so that they could get their votes and then still, do the same corporate warmongering crap that the Republicans would have done anyway. Well, it's time for that base to assert themselves over these people and force them to heal by replacing a lot of them. And probably still call them Democrats, but maybe finally actually start looking at some actual socialist and, dare I say, communist policies, and not just keep giving them lip service. It's all well and good to let people become transsexuals, but that's a cosmetic effect for the country, that doesn't actually do anything for people. That's not helpful, it's caring. It's open-minded. Those are not necessarily negative values, depending on how they're being applied. But it doesn't put food on anyone's table. It doesn't lower anyone's rent or any of that kind of shit. So, what we need is a soft communist takeover of the Democrats through political channels, and to run candidates honestly in the Democrat system to gain more control and influence over the state and national governing bodies. We don't need a revolution. That's one of the reasons why communism kept falling flat in other countries, is because of the revolution, because it had them start off in a militant, paranoid mindset. That's why so many of them resemble military juntas in South America. Oh God, that's another thing. Why how we're always boasting about how great we have it because we have the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans protecting us from anyone who wants to invade us? Right? There's wisdom in that. It takes a lot of money and resources to float a whole navy of cargo ships full of troops to another continent. You don't just pull that off easy, even with airplanes. So, if that's true, though, why on earth are we trying to start a war with people on our own continents? Because that natural barrier that protects us, makes us Fortress North America, it's fucking erased. People will be managed to be able to get shit up through the fucking Central American Isthmus. This is titanically stupid, and like I said, though, like a bunch of titanically stupid stuff has already been occurring. It's all a big sham, and you're all fools for sticking to it out of fucking stubborn pride, and because you weren't cool in high school. So much of this is because so many people on the right weren't cool in high school. Not even that they were nerds, because not all nerds are right-wing, but you don't have to be a nerd to be uncool.
Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator again, still in the editing studio. Just to be specifically clear, by cool, I'm not saying popular. You could have been popular in high school, but still not have been cool, if you catch the distinction. Anyway, let's get back to King Krampus.
Carrying fucking high school grudges with you the rest of your lives and trying to fucking take it out on fucking people because you resent them. You know, and then cloak yourself up in Jesus to like try to make you like, oh, I'm a good person. Good people don't need religion. They don't need external rules so they can monitor themselves so they know not to fucking kill people or fuck someone else's wife. You know. Why do you need God to tell you that? You know, there are people out there who don't understand these things, and to that end, religion might serve its purpose, but a genuinely good person doesn't need it. Anyway, though, I'm sure this is a bunch of scattershot all over the place stream of consciousness for people. Like, you guys really need to get it into your heads that, like, the whole conservative Republican brand, the brand of Christianity, even, is being fucking ruined right now. And the only thing you can do to save any of that, stop any of that, is to renounce it. I mean, you've already, like, permanently damaged whatever attempts have been being made to try to, you know, rehabilitate white people's fucking reputation on the global stage. That's already fucking thrown out the fucking window, but, you know, just fucking let go, guys. Who cares? And to the left, we've had 100 years of the march to the institutions. We're 100 years past the founding of the USSR, and we've had plenty of opportunity to measure the weaknesses and failures of Russia and the strengths and successes of China. I know, so that, like, we're not, as long as it's not fucking totalitarian and we're not forcing anyone on anything, we're just gonna try to dicker about policy with whatever ends up replacing the right wing. I guess it'll be the libertarians. That's what all y'all are gonna be voting for in about the next 5 years. So anyway, have fun, and until next time, comrades,
stay crampinated.